Hitting a 500-pound squat for the first time is extremely special. It's kind of like a rite of passage for us lifters. It's very similar to bench pressing 315 for the first time or deadlifting 600 pounds for the first time. There's just something really unique about putting 500 solid ass pounds on your back, right? And taking that thing down and up, all right? And what's more, the squat is unique, man. The squat is special because it's hard. You cannot fake squat strength, all right? I have never seen somebody who has a massive squat who does not look like they have a massive squat, all right? So squats are very hard, they're very special, and yeah, your levers can help. Some people are better built for it than others, but at the end of the day, man, you gotta be big to squat big. It's just plain and simple. And I love that. There's no faking it, all right? Now, that said, I believe there are 3 fundamental principles or rules, whatever you want to call them, that we can use to learn to squat 500 pounds. And I truly do believe it's yes, it's challenging, but it's very accessible. I think it's totally possible for the majority of people to achieve this. Myself, as an example, I am a 205-pound male lifter, or at least in competition. That's the weight class I compete in. The most I've ever squat in competition is 765 pounds. Lifetime natural lifter at 205. The most I've ever squat so far, as of last April, was 765. And I've hit 750 pounds multiple times, both in competition, internationally and domestically, and in training. I truly believe it's totally possible, all right? So without further ado, let's dive into the content. Very first thing we need to discuss is the foundation, which truthfully is just another word for technique, okay? We cannot build a skyscraper on sand. If we want to be strong, we first have to be stable. This means working on and perfecting our technique, which by the way, will evolve over time. But before we get into this, I just want to announce my one-to-one coaching is available, okay? Every month I take on new athletes, usually 3 to 5, all right? Now I'm only looking for people who are dedicated and committed and disciplined. I do not care if you do not compete in powerlifting. I work with strength athletes. I work with gen population. I work with a lot of people who are trying to body recomposition, meaning they just want to lose weight, they want to look good. I work with people who are looking to bodybuild but not necessarily step on stage, all right? I work with anyone and everyone who is open and willing to get stronger and to get better. If you'd like to work with me, you can apply at the link in the description, all right? Let's talk about this. So, the foundation. Like I said before, the foundation really just refers to technique, okay? We need to build and create quality technique and positioning if we want to be successful in the squat. Again, this is something that will change over time. Number one, you change over time. Your mass changes over time, right? Your body weight fluctuates. Your leverages will change. You get smarter. Your body awareness changes. I mean, so much happens over time that you cannot expect your technique to stay the same. However, there are major principles that will always apply. Okay, we're going to talk about those in a second. But perfecting technique is really, really important, even if it's going to change, because this is really what's going to be the glue that keeps everything together. And it's what's going to allow you to express maximum strength under maximum loads, okay? So bracing is probably the most important aspect of all of strength sports, of all of lifting. If you are not bracing, you don't have anything, and that's just the truth, okay? Now, I'm going to teach you how to brace here, but take what I say with a grain of salt. Everybody talks about this differently, and it can be a little bit difficult to teach without kind of like being hands-on or one-to-one, like in person. But I'm gonna do the best I can. So there's 2 different ways to think about it. The very first is probably the most common. The second is something I actually just picked up from a fellow coach who's really good, and I really like the way he explained it. So the first way, 360 degrees of intra-abdominal pressure. That is essentially what you are creating. Breathing in to what I call the diaphragm, right? Breathing in, expanding, but you're not just expanding your belly outwards, right? That's not really bracing. You're expanding everything. So here's the trick. Put your hands to your sides, squeeze in a little bit, exhale. Air, see how my hands expanded outwards? If you're doing it right, that's what you'll feel. Now we need to solidify that by what I like to call crunching the core. But this isn't like we're just closing a rib cage. That's not it, because we're not trying to round the back or anything like that. All we're doing is trying to lock all of that air pressure in. So I like to think about it as if someone's about to punch me in the stomach. That sensation of bracing, I'm not gonna go like this, but that sensation of tightening my core and bracing, once I have air here, now I feel stable, right? Okay, that's the first way to talk about this. The second way, which I picked up from a coach, his name is Thomas Lilly. He described, basically it's the same thing, but instead of thinking about it as if like you're gonna get punched in the stomach or anything like that, you're gonna breathe in, push out, especially if you're wearing a belt, it helps to breathe into the belt. You're gonna breathe in, push out, and you know how when you exhale, this is what happens? Okay, now exhale without actually letting air out. You'll feel everything tighten and engage. You'll get the same result. Now, for me personally, that doesn't always work because I tend to actually get a little bit lightheaded. And so if you run into that issue as well, honestly, my perspective is my suggestion is to go with that first option, but that's just two different ways to think about it, right? But bracing is extremely important. We need to do that before every single set, before every single rep. We always want to be bracing, okay? This is what creates stability. Not just stability for your spine, not just stability for your torso, but stability for the entire movement, for your hips, everything. So bracing is 100% necessary. We need to practice this, get really, really good at it. Positioning. Now, this is where we're gonna talk about technique. And so we have a lot to cover here because this is everything from bar position to grip width to foot position, all of this stuff. If you guys want a full in-depth guide, I recently released the Ultimate Squat System. It's got over 70 pages of content, everything from technique to general training questions like accessory work, RPE, percentages, how to manipulate your training so that it works for you over time, all these, and it also comes with 3 different programs. Philosophy stuff, everything's in there, okay? That's $47, you can buy that, and it'll basically give you access to all the stuff we're talking about here. So if you want to check that out, I only recommend it because I'm gonna be flying through some of this stuff, and if you want time to look at it and kind of like read through everything, then that's gonna be your best bet, all right? But when it comes to positioning, I need you guys to understand that what works for me may not work for you. What works for your favorite lifter probably won't work for you. What you see your favorite lifter doing probably isn't actually what he's doing or she's doing, okay? So we just wanna be mindful of that. The best technique is what's best for you. Now, I like to look at technique from the perspective of efficiency, effectiveness, and safety. Safety is kind of irrelevant because a lot of times there's only so much you can do. Like, of course, you're gonna try and train as safely as you can, but there's nothing inherently safe about putting 500 pounds on your back, all right? But efficiency and effectiveness, this is what creates strong positions. You know, the position you use that's gonna be most effective may not be the position you'd be in to be the most efficient, right? And then vice versa, the position you'd be in to be super efficient may not be the position you'd be in to be super effective. So the goal is to try and find some balance of that, okay? So yeah, but all of this stuff revolves around like universal laws, like principles, okay? And the most important one that I could give you when it comes to squats, most especially, is center of mass / center of gravity. They are two different things, but in our context, we're gonna just pretend they're the same. We just need to make sure, in like super ultra layman's terms, we need to make sure that we can stay balanced throughout the squat. We don't wanna be too far forward, we don't wanna be too far backwards, and we don't want that position to change much as we squat. In a perfect world, we can go straight down and straight up with that bar going in line with our center of mass, straight down, straight up, okay? That's what we want, all right? So to do this, we'll mess with the bar position, meaning high bar, low bar, right? We'll mess with our hips position, right? Maybe we'll be a little bit hinged, right? Maybe we'll be a little bit upright. We mess with our foot position, right? So all of these things, we just manipulate so that we can make sure that bar goes straight down and straight up because that's what's most efficient. And how we adjust ourselves under that bar will judge our effectiveness, right? Because we want to be able to use our muscle tissue and use it adequately. All right, so the very first thing we want to talk about with positioning, I guess, you know, some people like to start from the feet. I'm going to start from the hands because in my opinion, you know, it doesn't matter that much. Grip width, whatever's comfortable for you in terms of how narrow or how wide. The wider you go, the looser you'll feel in your upper back. The more narrow you go, the tighter you'll feel, but it'll be harder to brace and also harder to make sure that you can maintain like a relatively neutral spine and a stacked torso throughout the movement. Because if you're super, super tight, usually what happens is it forces me into like some degree of extension, right? And so it's harder for me to actually stay like stacked, right? Whereas if I go super wide, sometimes it's actually harder for me to feel like tense, right? Because I'm so wide. My general recommendation is start shoulder width and work your way outwards or inwards, depends on what you want. We just want to find comfortable, confident positions to which we can be strong or in which we can be strong, all right? So grip width, like I said, pick whatever feels good and just play around with it. You know, obviously the bar position is going to affect a lot of that. So actually, yeah, let's talk about that. So there's high bar and there's low bar, okay? The high bar, I'll just show you here. If this is somebody's neck here, and this is somebody's like back here, right? High bar kind of exists like here, right? It's very, very close to the base of the neck, if not at the base of the neck. Low bar, however, we'll use a different color, how about that? Oops. Low bar, however, is going to sit much lower, kind of on the shelf we like to say, of the rear delt. Okay, so your rear delts, when you pull them together, when you retract your scapula, they create a shelf. I do not have the shoulder mobility to show you on my own back. But in short, that bar just simply sits a little bit lower. Now, it doesn't have to be that aggressive of a difference, right? It can be a matter of an inch or two. But the difference is that that lower bar position is it's going to unfortunately force your torso forward a little bit, which means you get to use a little bit more of your posterior chain, but it makes it easier to squat straight up and down because now you don't have to fight for this upright position, right? Because if you're super upright during a squat, the moment that you come forward, right? See that? The moment I come forward, especially if I'm lifting heavy weight, it's very common for me to grind from this position. The moment I do that, it's so hard for me to maintain position and fight through that because I'm out leveraged there. Whereas, why? Because that bar shifted, I guess, along our center of mass, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah, anyway, whatever. You get what I'm trying to say here. But if that bar's position is lower, now I can stay here and I don't have to worry about my torso being as upright, right? I can do this. Okay, so you get what I'm saying here. We just want to be efficient, okay? Choose the position that's better for you. In my ebook, or sorry, not my ebook, well, I guess it is an ebook. In the Ultimate Squat System, I go through this. I have a whole section on high bar versus low bar, on heels versus flats. I go through all of this stuff. I talk very in depth about center of mass and center of gravity and how that relates to your position. I talk about all of this stuff. So if you're into the minutia of all this, definitely check it out. So that's bar position. In short though, higher bar position, probably gonna need to stay more upright, right? So usually when you have a more upright squat, you're using less of your posterior chain because you're less hinged, using less hips, literally. You're gonna use a lot more quads in that position. Low bar is just the opposite, all right? Yes, how you're built will probably determine which one's better for you, but 90% of strength athletes will opt for a lower bar position because it does make it easier for you to be more effective. You can use more muscle, right? Because you can include more of your posterior chain. So yeah, okay, now we're working our way down. We talked about grip width, we talked about bar position. Let's talk about your hips, your knees, and your feet. And I like to talk about this all in one fell swoop because they're all really connected in a way. So foot width, similar to grip width, you're gonna find what works for you, all right? You're gonna have to do what you feel is comfortable, confident, and stable. If that's super narrow, that's fine. If your feet are wide and angled out, that's fine too. What we need to consider here is squat depth. What we also want to consider here, remember, is being able to go straight down and straight up. Now, I'm going to use the term midfoot pressure here because I've found that that's probably the best way to teach an efficient squat, is we want midfoot pressure. Now, what you wear will determine where that pressure is. For example, in heels, the midfoot pressure is going to be closer towards the knuckles of the feet. In flats, it's going to be more towards literally the middle of the foot, right? It makes sense. Why? Because that's how you stay balanced, right? That's literally, that bar needs to be in line with your center of mass, right? I think I'm saying this right. But anyway, you need to be rooted, stable, and able to move with that bar in an efficient path. And so that means directly straight up and down. So if that's straight up and down, right? Imagine squatting on your toes. That's not gonna be strong. Imagine squatting on your heels. That's not gonna be strong either, right? So we need to be in a position so that that bar is able to sit on our back and so that we can break at the knees and the hips, squat straight down, and drive up without an issue. And now you've seen it. If your chest starts to collapse, boom, that takes you out of position, right? Very rarely this happens, but sometimes that bar will start to travel forward. You're sitting too much on your heels. That becomes an issue. Or sorry, that bar goes backwards. You sit on your heels, it becomes an issue. So the point is, we need to make sure that we set our feet up so that we have enough room for us to squat straight down, hit adequate depth, and not have to force that bar forwards or backwards. Okay, so that bar can pretty much travel straight down and up, all right? Now, one little trick that you can use, it's kind of like a PT test to figure out the angle of your foot, is you can hold onto a rack, and all you're gonna do is just pick your knee up, right? Okay, angle it out slightly, pick your knee up again, okay? Angle it out a little bit more, pick your knee up, okay? The position in which you had your knee travel the greatest distance or end up at the highest point, I'm saying this terribly, but you get what I'm saying. That's probably the foot angle you'll want to use in your squats. Not always, but usually. Now, the last thing I'll say here, so we can move on, is I like to cue people to break at the knees and the hips at the same time when they squat, and we'll talk about that when we get to execution. But just keep in mind that you don't need to focus too much on one version of a squat or the other. And what I really mean here is focus on driving the knees out and forwards more than, sitting back and keeping your shins vertical. Like, throw all that nonsense out the window, okay? All you need to do is think straight up and down like an elevator. What position do I need to be in, right? How do I manipulate my body under this barbell so that I can feel strong, stable, comfortable, confident, all that, right? And go straight down and straight back up. What do I need to do? That's it, right? So to me, use whatever cues you need to use to do that. Some lifters, because of how they're built, because of their limb lengths, because of their leverages, they will have to have a more hip dominant squat. Some lifters will have a more quad dominant squat, right? They'll be squatting a lot more upright and stuff, whereas some lifters will be hinged over quite a bit. Everyone's built differently, but the mechanics stay the same, the principles stay the same, okay? So just keep that in mind, all right? So I like to tell people, just think about breaking at the knees and the hips at the same time, because that's what's gonna allow you to come straight down, straight up. Again, foot width, foot angle, that stuff will all kind of work itself out as you start to do this. Now, again, the last thing I'll mention here is midfoot pressure is kind of important, okay? So when in doubt, always think about midfoot pressure and keeping that bar in line with the midfoot as you're squatting, because that's how you'll stay balanced, and it's, pretty efficient, right? Okay, so now let's talk about execution. And guys, I apologize, I know this is a really long section, but there's a lot when it comes to squats. So I apologize, but it is what it is, man. We said we wanted to squat 500 pounds, right? You thought that shit was gonna be easy? All right, so when it comes to execution, very first thing, when you're getting under the bar, all I want you to think about is tension. We're building tension. We're trying to create a stacked position. We don't wanna be super loose. We don't wanna be super arched, right? We want to be natural and organic and balanced. I know these sound like foo-foo words, and it's like, yeah, that's easy for you to say, but you'll see, man, as you squat more and more, you'll start to realize like, oh yeah, okay, this does feel more natural for me, or this position feels more natural for me. And I get that sense of stability and confidence when I'm in this position, but when I'm in this position, it feels kind of weird. I have to force it. You'll start to get in tune with that stuff, all right? So when it comes to execution, very first thing I want you to do is walk your chest to the bar. Okay, so what we want to do is build upper back tension. We want a strong, tight upper back, because this is our base right now. This is where the bar is resting. We don't want to be super loose and relaxed, okay? So we want a nice, strong upper back. Now, I don't like to tell people to just kind of like get under the bar and start working themselves in, because what happens is they get into this hyperextended position as they're doing that, and it's very difficult to brace from here and come out of that properly, okay? Instead, if they simply walk to the bar, their shoulders, or their scapula rather, are retracted more than enough, okay? Then you lunge under the bar, right? Okay, work yourself under, find that shelf, high bar right up here, and the low bar is probably gonna be somewhere over here, right along the rear delt, wherever you find it, it's fine. Find that spot, right? And the way that I like to think about wrenching in the upper back is I don't really grab the bar much. I don't coach people on creating tons of tension with their pinkies on the bar. Like, these are small little cues that 100% can help people, but to me, it's just not worth really talking about, because they're always changing, always evolving. And again, I think it's better to just talk about the principles, and you can find what works for you from there, like find the icing on the cake, so to speak. So what I do instead is I focus on the elbows, because I believe that the elbows follow the lat, or the lat follows the elbow, whatever, one of those versions is true. So all I want you to think about is elbows into the torso and in line with the torso. I don't want to see this. I hate it when I see this, okay? And if you'll notice, it's very difficult to kind of be under the bar and have your elbows super far forward, right? It's just not really possible with the back squat. So what I usually tell people, especially beginner lifters or people who are looking to squat 500 pounds, what I tell them, meaning closer to like intermediate level lifter, depending on weight class, obviously, usually what I tell them is to pull their elbows forwards to the wall in front of them and into their rib cage. If you do those two things, you would go from, like, let's say walking under the bar, boom, you're here, to now this. And when I do that, like, feel it. Pull your elbow into your side. I'm literally contracting my lat right now. That's what's happening. That's what we want under the bar, okay? So this creates nice upper back tension, okay? That's simple. Now that the upper back is set, all we have to think about is the walkout, right? Now, before we walk out, we have to get our feet set, okay? So find that foot position. No one-legged nonsense of unracking, okay? Find the foot position that's comfortable for you. You can be more narrow or more wide, whatever's comfortable for you. This is just the unrack. We still have to walk it out. Okay, find that foot position. All I want you to do, and this is, by the way, happening as you're lunging under the bar. So you find that you build that tension up your back. You have your foot position. Most important part, brace, okay? Brace. And you're gonna slowly push the slack out of the bar, then extend at the knee. And then you can walk out, patience. Walk out, patience. You can take, I would say, 2 to 3 steps max, okay? No more than that. It's not necessary. Find that foot position, which you'll naturally be in, honestly, especially as you practice. We'll talk about that in a second. You find your head position. And this is probably the last piece of, this part of execution that we need to talk about. Head position is something that's very subjective, very preferential. In my honest opinion, 45-degree angle or looking at something 10 to 15 feet out in front of you is probably your best bet. If you like to look down, you can look down. If you want to look up, you can look up. But the body follows the head usually. All right. So people who look down tend to fold a lot. People who look up tend to hyperextend a lot. Okay. So my general recommendation is to simply find a spot that's about 10 to 15 feet out in front of you, so your head position ends up like here. Okay. Chin up. Chin stays up as you squat. Okay. If your head position changes as you squat, it's not great. Okay, we don't want that. We want our head position to stay the same throughout the entirety of the squat. Okay. And now it's time for the squat. Okay, so it's exactly kind of what I said before. I generally recommend people just simply think about breaking at the knees and the hips at the same time. That way you can get your hips engaged, also getting your quads engaged, and that's it. That makes for a great squat. Thomas Lilly, again, he gave me a cue recently that kind of helped. It was twist the quads away from each other. The only thing I don't like about it is I find myself kind of doing it to the extreme where I almost feel like I'm on the outsides of my foot, and I don't have like that, what they call a tripod stance foot, where it's like big toe, pinky, and heel kind of creating like a nice like talon grip into the floor. In a perfect world, that's what you're gonna have. Okay, you're gonna create that tripod foot, and you're gonna ride that pressure straight down and straight up, all right? There are some people who coach like a pre-hinge, right? There are some people who coach something like a, knees out and you want to stay super upright. I'm not here to talk about all that, okay? That stuff is extremely nuanced, and in my opinion, it only confuses people, all right? So if you just focus on these basic principles that I've talked about, you're good. Now, control is king when it comes to execution. I'm not saying go super, super slow-mo, but I don't want you to just drop into the hole. Okay, that's not what we're doing. We're not doing that football camp style squats. We're not doing that, okay? Yes, we want to be powerful, but our goal is to be strong. And strength is smooth, okay? So be smooth. Control all the way down, boom, and fire back up, all right? Now, when you fire back up, you're going to drive your back into the bar, hips through, the whole thing, okay? I talk about all of this stuff in the PDF, so if you want more information about it, obviously check that out. But that's pretty much everything on bracing, positioning, and execution. I'm sure I am missing stuff. I'm sure I am. But hopefully this covers the gist of it. All I want you to think about is being strong, stable, and confident. Find a position that allows you to go straight down and straight up, okay? Relatively speaking. We're not machines, we're not perfect, but relatively speaking. We want an efficient bar path, which is straight up, straight down. And we want to be effective. So we want to position that bar on our back so that we can use the most amount of muscle possible. Last thing we need to talk about when it comes to the foundation, holy smokes, I feel like I've been talking about this for like 30 minutes. Consistency. Consistency is huge, guys. All I mean here is set up and execute the same every time. Every rep, every set, we need to be consistent. Now, it's okay to play around with stuff, practice different stuff, try out new things, but please be consistent, especially with things like bracing. Okay, that has to be the same. Point blank, all right? You just need to be consistent. It's the only way you'll ingrain the proper motor patterns, and you'll make sure that if there are any inadequacies and holy smoky smokes, inefficiencies, you'll notice them. You'll find them when you are consistent, okay? The last thing I guess we could talk about here is heels versus flats. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm just gonna give you my general recommendation if you wanna learn more about the pros and cons of each. Check it out in the Ultimate Squat System. Heels and flats. So my general recommendation for people, wear flats. Unless you absolutely need heels, wear flats. There are some cases in which I definitely would recommend you wear heels, but 9 times out of 10, you can wear flats, all right? Especially if you're a newer lifter. most people don't really need squat heels, and they tend to cause more issues than they solve, to be honest with you. I know a lot of guys who just end up with lots of knee pain, adductor issues, like a whole bunch of stuff. It's not even really their fault. It's the shoe, you know. Every shoe is different. The insoles make a big difference. I mean, there's so much to it, you know. So, yeah, my general recommendation, flats until you need heels, essentially. All right. Okay. Whew. That was a lot. Let's move on to the second principle or rule or whatever. We still have to walk the bar in, right? Okay, so just so you know, when you walk the bar in, please, please, please don't do one of these. Don't throw the bar into the rack, okay? Walk that bar fully into the rack. Feel both sides of the bar, both. Not one side, both. Both sides of the bar, hit the rack, slide it down, okay? I don't give a shit if you scrape the bar or if you scrape the rack. I'm sorry, I own my own stuff. Like, I get it. I love my equipment. I try and take care of my equipment. Your safety and the safety of others around you is way more important. Also, too, nobody's grabbing the bar out there, all right? Just, it's fine. It can handle it. Bring that bar in. I've seen way too many fails, way too many times when people have hit their squat, come in and they miss the hook, right? Or they try and jump it in and then it pops back out. Just weird stuff. We can avoid all of that by being smart and being patient, okay? Walk it in all the way and then slowly guide it down into the hooks, plain and simple. Also make sure that the rack height is proper for you, okay? You don't want it super, super low, but you really don't want it super, super tall either. There's a lot we could talk about with squats, man. So I do believe that there should be phases to your training to some degree, okay? It is important for there to be variation throughout your training seasons. And I do think that everything's kind of happening at the same time, but there are certain things that require a little bit more focus, a little bit more attention. And that makes sense because literally how you would train for a specific outcome or adaptation is different from something else, right? There's a reason why bodybuilders don't train like powerlifters. And there's a reason why powerlifters who are competing in 4 weeks tend to train differently than powerlifters who are competing in 24 weeks, okay? Okay, so I truly do believe that if you were to follow these things, you'll see results, okay? Like I said, it's the bare bones and basics, but I do think this will get you pretty damn far. All right, so I do believe that if you want a 500-pound squat, you really do need to focus on your hypertrophy. You need to build muscle. Again, you cannot fake squat strength. You need, if you want to squat heavy, you need strong quads, strong hamstrings, strong glutes. That's what you need. You also do need a strong upper back, of course, but that's less important. That's more about stability and maintaining a position rather than kind of lifting the weight, right? What's lifting the weight, what's moving the weight are your legs. So we need strong legs, adductors, right? We need strong legs, strong legs, well-rounded legs. Okay, so hypertrophy is really, really important. We'll talk about this more once we get to accessories, but just know that on average, your hypertrophy blocks, your hypertrophy sessions, going to be low specificity. This means you're not really going to be doing the competition movements or using the competition style movements to build your muscle, all right? That probably won't be the case. Higher volume for sure, right? And probably lower load, okay? Now, the reason why I'm not using the word intensity is because your intensity is going to be pretty fucking high when it comes to hypertrophy. Why? Because we know the primary driver of hypertrophy is basically coming as close to failure as you possibly can. You want to reach muscular failure. You want your muscles to be stressed, to be strained. So in order to do that, intensity needs to be high, right? The sets need to be hard, okay? So that's why I'm saying load, not necessarily intensity as a figure, because, you know, I may say RPE 8, but, you know, if it's a set of 10 at RPE 8, that doesn't mean that the weight necessarily needs to be super, super heavy. It might be, but, you know, at the end of the day, we're just going for getting close to failure. Like that's what we are going for. And that's why a lot of that hypertrophy will come from your accessories, but again, we'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, you need to be building tons of muscle. I personally think that if you spend, what color should we use for this, guys? If you spend, let's say, 3 months here, you're gonna get jacked. And that's exactly what you want. Now remember that the name of the game when it comes to programming, no matter who you are, is progressive overload. We need to create progressions over time. Yeah, you can build lots of muscle just kind of going into the gym and just training to failure pretty much, and training really, really hard on certain movements. It doesn't even have to be a lot of movements. But when you're a power lifter, it is still really, really important to progressively or create progressions over time in your movements, especially your variations of your main movements. So like maybe you're not pushing your competition low bar squat, but you are going to push front squats and high bar, right? So it is really important to remember like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm at least trying to create some sort of progression. I'm not just maxing out every single week. And that's really important. We don't want to just max out every single week. We want to be strategic. We want to be smart. Okay, we want to create progressions. So, in my opinion, anywhere or anything really over like that 6 rep range, I would say 6 to 10 reps is probably the sweet spot for most of your main movements. That's going to be like, again, that's going to be your bread and butter, 60 to 75%, maybe 80%, although 80% gets pretty heavy, pretty fast. Yeah, that's probably going to be the rep range and the percentage range you're going to be working with. When it comes to your accessories, it's completely different. But yeah, again, just my opinion. The movement, of course, will change that. That's why I say 60 to 75%, because if you're doing front squats, chances are you probably can't do 70 to 75% of your 1RM back squat off the rip. Like you probably can't do like 10 reps with that, right? If you can, then your 1RM back squat is definitely not what you think it is. So all that to say, just know that you'll probably want to lean towards greater volume. And you can achieve that in multiple ways, but the goal is really muscle fatigue, okay? But we still want to create those progressions. Okay, so moving on, strength work. Your specificity is going to increase naturally because strength is a skill. We want to practice the skill of squatting, not just squatting, but squatting in the position that we're going to be in when we test our squat / go compete. Volume and load is going to be relatively moderate. So I would say, that age-old 3 to 5 reps at like 70 to 85% of your 1RM, that kind of work is quality work. The goal here is not to kill yourself on your main movements. I shouldn't say that. Yes, you're going to be pushing really hard, but the goal isn't to be like AMRAPing all the time and just completely fatiguing the shit out of yourself all the time, okay? This is a time for you to be strong. So the weight on the bar actually really does matter now. And our goal is to, again, create quality progressions over time. And I do believe that if you stick to that 3 to 5 rep range, you will build strength. Okay, you will absolutely build strength. To manage fatigue here, leverage percent drops, leverage ascending sets, like you can do all that stuff for sure. But again, in my opinion, to get to a 500-pound squat, especially if your body weight, which we'll talk about in a little bit, especially if your body weight is a little bit higher, like, dude, 3 to 5 reps, that's a sweet spot for strength work, and that's 70 to 85%. That's a sweet spot for strength work. All right. Last thing you want to do is just over fatigue yourself, and we can talk about that later. But yeah, I think that's going to work. But yeah, higher specificity. So you're going to stick closer to your main movements. Maybe instead of doing stuff that's further variations, like, on deadlifts, not deadlifts, on squats, instead of doing like an SSB bar, you're going to use barbell, but you're going to do like pause squats or tempos, right? Instead of front squats, maybe you're going to do the high bar squats, right? Because it's closer to your competition squat, which might be like a low bar squat. All right. And you'll actually probably be doing your competition squat at least once a week anyway. Okay, peaking. Specificity at the max. Load is pretty much at the max. Volume goes down. Okay. Now you don't want to completely plummet your volume. You want to maintain work capacity. So some coaches like to give, sets of 5s or 6s or 7s, like super light throughout the week, just to kind of maintain your motor. But honestly, a lot of your work capacity will probably come from your accessories. So you'll probably be fine. But yeah, specificity is going to be at an all-time high, right? Because now you're peaking. You're trying to completely maximize your performance for one rep in one specific movement. Like, this is everything, right? So we want to get as specific as possible. And of course, load is going to go up, right? So you're talking about, your singles at 90 to 95%, right? Like that's what you're talking about now. Naturally, I think that all of this stuff should have like a clean progression over time. So let's say you did hypertrophy for 2 to 3 months, which would be like 8 to 12 weeks. Strength work, same thing, maybe 8 to 12 weeks. And then you peak for 4 weeks or 8 weeks, however long you think you need. Now that's a pretty solid ass program right there. Last but not least, let's talk about accessories. So I truly believe this, to squat 500 pounds, especially if you weigh more than 175 to 185 pounds, accessories are probably the only thing stopping you from being able to squat 500 pounds, because your accessories are what will ultimately really help you develop your musculature. And if you have really developed musculature, like I'm telling you, bro, you'll be able to squat 500 pounds. So take your accessories really seriously. Leg extensions and leg curls, all that stuff is great, but we really want to build muscle. We want to build density. We want to build thickness. So we need to pick movements that we can really load up and progress. That's going to be things like your belt squats, your leg presses, your RDLs, right? Hinge-based movements. A lot of people neglect that. Barbell rows are another one in here because we said before we need a strong upper back, right? Well, in my opinion, barbell rows are great because not only do you need to perform them in a hinged position, similar torso angle to what you might be in at the bottom of a squat, but it builds so much thickness and density because it's a free weight compound movement that can be loaded. You can get heavy with it, right? Now, don't push yourself to the extreme of you hurting your lower back or anything like that, but it not only does it train strength and stability in a position that's similar to what you'd be in if you were in the hole, believe it or not, but although I'm sure some people will debate me on that, but it also allows you to load your back and use your back with heavy weights, which most of the time you can't really do that in most back movements. All right. Yeah, I just think it's special. So the only other one that I want to mention here, honorable mention, is Bulgarian split squats. You can do these dumbbell, barbell. I think these are phenomenal, but the stronger you get, the harder they are to really load up and perform. They also become a little bit dangerous. People have a hate-love relationship with them because they suck. They really do suck. They're really hard. But I just think that they build so much strength and muscle that it's really hard to ignore them. Like, definitely leverage them in terms of single leg versus double leg, like on leg press and all that stuff. Like, leverage it all. Do it all. I would argue that when you're in your hypertrophy season, that's when you can sprinkle in all of the stuff that is not as specific. So dumbbell Bulgarian split squats or barbell Bulgarians, single leg press, right? You can sprinkle all that stuff in then because you can afford to, right? Not only are things very unspecific, but you're also looking to build as much muscle as possible. Now, as you get closer and closer to the peak, the movements get closer and closer to the main movements. They become more specific, but we're also trying to save ourselves a little bit and not fatigue ourselves too much, right? One thing I will say is please don't neglect the hinge. Like, don't neglect that. You need strong hips. So barbell hip thrusts are great. The leg press will take care of a lot of stuff depending on how you perform them. The RDLs, I think, are phenomenal because they build your erectors, right? Your erectors, your back. But they will, of course, also work your hips, like your glutes and some hamstring. I think that's all great. Hamstring curls, leg extensions, like all that stuff's great. But the heavier compound stuff, the stuff that you can really load, the free weight stuff, I think that's all phenomenal for leg growth and leg strength. One thing I did want to mention too before we move on is that your body weight really does matter. So just keep this in mind, okay? It's going to be easier to go through all this when you are bulking or when you're in a caloric surplus. The other thing is, again, like if you're heavier, it's going to be easier, all right? Like a 2 times body weight squat is not that crazy, but a 2.2 to 2.5 to especially 3 times body weight squat, that's when we're like, okay, like this is pretty impressive, right? Then once you get to that like 3.2, 3.3, 3.5, now you're like, holy shit, like this person's strong. 4X is crazy. I'm aiming for that 4X, right? I want to squat, over 800 pounds. But depending on your body weight, if you hit a 500-pound squat, it's either going to be really accessible or you're going to have to work for it. No matter where you're at, I think all of this stuff, most especially the accessories, is really going to help. The last thing I'll say here too, because I don't want to forget to mention this, the accessories, again, in the hypertrophy phase, leverage them like crazy because yes, you can use main movements to accumulate your volume and build your legs. You can use accessories, you can use both, you can use one or the other. Every coach has different philosophies. In my opinion, it depends on the athlete, depends on what they can tolerate. Most people have back pain and back issues, so I usually don't push the main movements for their lower body volume. Also too, there are limiting factors when it comes to using main movements to push your volume, okay? Number one being, the moment your back gets tired and your positioning falls apart, you're no longer really training your legs, right? That's a limiter. But if I put you in a belt squat or a leg press, you can go all fucking day without worrying about your back for the most part, right? So in my opinion, accessories, depending on what you choose, might be better options for developing true muscle hypertrophy in the lower body than just simply using the main movements, okay? But it is also good to like build your ability to AMRAP, 70% or 75% for 10 reps, 15 reps, that can be helpful, all right? Yeah, I think that's everything I want to say on programming. We have one more thing we need to talk about before we move on, and I know it's getting long. This video is probably going to be way too long, but I need you guys to have everything that you need to squat 500 pounds. It means that much to me. So before we move on, we have one more thing to talk about, and that is how you might structure your training in order to go squat 500 pounds. All right, now I'm not going to get super nitty gritty, but I want to give you some idea of a progression. In my opinion, there's really 3 major ways. Most of this stuff will operate in like 4 to 5 week blocks, okay? No matter what phase it is, okay? Now, again, you're going to have a taper at the end of your peak. So, if you're going to be having a test day or meet day, usually your taper is just where you cut back your intensity and or volume and or frequency even by a certain percentage. You're basically just pulling back enough to let your body recover. So maybe you eliminate most of your accessories that week, or you cut back your intensity definitely on your main movements by a lot, just to give yourself the extra space and recovery, room to recover going into that game day, that meet day, that test day. All right. But we also use that same ideology when it comes to our just regular training weeks and training blocks, because we're not machines. We can't just constantly go up and up and up and up and up and up, right? The best programming is the programming that does progress over time, right, in some fashion. That said, we want to be very strategic, okay? So again, 4 to 5 week cycles is usually what it is. Now, in terms of how you progress, my general recommendation is you follow one of 3 options. Option 1 is your week 1 is kind of like a deload week. And then week 2, you build on that. Week 3, you build on that. Week 4, you build on that. Then when you go back to your week 1, again, it's kind of like a deload week, but you're starting heavier and at a greater volume or intensity or whatever than your previous block's week 1. So in essence, yes, it's still a deload. Yes, it's still obviously lighter than weeks 4, 3, and potentially 2. But the idea here is that over time, you're progressing it, right? Now, naturally, maybe over time, the volume goes down, the intensity goes up, like all these variables might change. But the point is, week 1 is the deload, right? There's no other time when you're pulling back. Second option, week 4 is the taper / deload, okay? And in this situation, week 1 is week 1, right? But you're also going to be taking chunks out of week 4, because week 4 or week 5, whatever you choose to be the end of your block, is going to be the heaviest week. It's going to be the hardest week, potentially the most challenging week, right? So sometimes athletes like to recover more during their week 4. They taper into the week 4. That way they can feel really fresh and really productive going into their hardest sets, right? Now, this is great. The downside, though, is that now you're really only getting 2 weeks of truly quality training, because you're still going to kind of have to pull back going into that week 1, right? Like you're going to reset. Even if you're starting off heavier than you were on the previous block's week 1, you're still resetting, right? Then you're going to build back up. But then after just 2 weeks, you're pulling back enough so that you can perform really well in your week 4. So you're really only having 2 solid weeks of training. If it's a 4-week block, 3 if it's a 5-week block. So this method works, and I use this method. Like a lot of people use this method. But there's a third option, and the third option is to always have an extra week in between each block. So it's kind of a part of that training block, but it's also not. So let's say you're going to operate in 5-week cycles, okay? 4 weeks of building up, no pulling back. Then that 5th week, you're pulling back completely. It is a mandatory deload. You're going to cut everything in half. Maybe it's the volume, it's intensity, it's both, whatever. You're really deloading. You're pulling back. Then you're going to start off that next training block, week 1 through week 5 or week 4, right? And then again, an instituted deload, as opposed to working that deload into the actual training progression of that block, if that makes sense. Hopefully I'm not butchering this. But yeah, you can choose the option that's going to suit you, but I do recommend that you do deload, you reset at some point. Every 4 to 5, maybe even 6th week is really, 4th, 5th, and 6th week is really important. And you want to make sure you're creating progressions over time, all right? We do not have enough time to really talk about the nitty gritty of progressing movements and all those programming choices. But in my opinion, if you just understand the basics of this, you'll be able to program it yourself. Like it really won't be that complicated. The one thing you just want to make sure is you manage your fatigue properly. All right. We just have to make sure we manage our fatigue properly, and we're not pushing ourselves way too hard, especially from a volume perspective. Once you get to here and here, because that stuff will catch up to you. All right. Now I think that we're done with the method. This was a lot, but hopefully you guys are getting the gist of everything, and hopefully this is helping you. All right, let's move on. The final step here. All right, thank you. If you are still watching this, man, thank you. You have hung with me this whole time. I do want to give a quick shout out, by the way, to Able. I almost forgot. I am sponsored by Able, AYBL, code Gavin10 for 10% off. If you want to support, thank you. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. All right, so now the final step here is the mental. And some people are going to blow this off, but this is huge, man. The mental really does hold you back. It's held me back a lot, especially when it came to world record attempts and hitting depth. Usually what locks my body up the most is doubt, fear, anxiety, hesitation. The moment I relax, but the moment I allow myself to enter a flow state, no doubt, no hesitation, no real feeling. It's just execute, just do the job. I get the job done. But when I don't do that, when I allow fear and doubt and anxiety to take over, everything changes, right? My body seizes, my body locks up. We want to avoid that. All right, now there's ways we do that by trusting our training, by training hard, training to standard, practicing it, right? But what I want to talk to you about here, 3 major things. And if you want more, I actually recorded a great video on this on, I think it is like the mindset of squatting 700 pounds or something like that, or the mindset you need to hit heavy squats. Check my channel, I have it there. And I talk about actual tips and tricks you can use to improve your mental game when it comes to squats, because I do believe squats, man, are the perfect analogy of life. And this sounds corny and cliche, but it's true. Something heavy has been placed upon you and is literally existing to bring you down to the earth. It wants to bury you. It wants to crush you. That is its sole purpose. And you have to resist it. Not only do you have to carry yourself, lift yourself, you have to lift the weight as well. That's life. What you apply to your squat training is what you'd be applying to your life. Sounds corny, sounds cringy, but it's true. Patience. You have to be patient. All right. A lot of people rush the squat. That rushing is a symptom of fear. You're afraid. So you get all amped up and hyped up and you get crazy and you come out and then now you're rushing, you're out of position, right? And you're shaky. Stop. Be confident. Be controlled. Don't be slow and relaxed and lazy. Be confident and in control. All right. Exert your will, but be patient. Commit. You have to go all in. Okay. No room for hesitation. Do or do not. There is no try. All in. Once you get under that bar, stop thinking about all the what ifs. It's done. Just focus on taking that bar, descending, and then driving up. All right, that's it. Lastly, think 600 pounds, not 500. All right, I use this mental trick and mental cue too today. Whenever I aim for a number, I don't hit it. I hit just short of it. So what I've learned is, well, if I aim for that number, I'll hit this number. It's crazy how it works. So right now I want to hit 804. So I don't aim for 804 on squat. I aim for 821. Right now, I have a 765 pound squat. When I hit that 765, I wasn't aiming for 765. I went into the day wanting 771 to 782. In my experience, aim high because chances are you will fall short. It's just human nature. Sometimes you will hit the goal, but it's very difficult, especially if you're an ambitious athlete. Aim high because then wherever you do hit, and by the way, things happen on meet day, things outside of your control, especially if you're doing water cuts and gut cuts and all this stuff, it changes things. Aim high. That way, wherever you do hit, if you don't hit it, but you hit something a little bit lower, it's going to still be a great fucking number. So aim for 600 because that'll completely change your perspective. Also, too, 600 sounds way crazier than 500, right? That means 500 ain't shit, not compared to 600, certainly not compared to 700. So if you aim for 600, when you go to attempt 500, you're like, bro, this is nothing. I'm trying to get to 600. The fuck is 500, right? When I say to myself, like, bro, I'm trying to squat 800. The hell is 771? 771 would still be a PR. But relative to 821, it's nothing. It's nothing. All right, just put it on my back. Let's do it. It's done. And that's the last thing actually I want to mention because I didn't write this down. But your body doesn't know numbers, okay? I said this to a fellow athlete of mine. He's one of the greatest 74s in human history, if not the greatest, Austin Perkins. I said this to him before a national championship, I think it was. He was getting ready to squat like 705 or something like that for the first time on the platform, possibly even in his life. And I told him, I was like, bro, I think you hit 683 for like 2 reps or 3 reps, something like that. I was like, bro, that's literally a 10 on each side. That's it. Your body doesn't know that. Your body doesn't know the number 705. It just feels weight. So resist it. It's up here. This is where the work has to happen because the body will follow. All right? So whenever you're attempting the 500, whatever you're at right now, 450, 445, bro, that's literally 2 sets of 10s on each side. What the hell is that? That's nothing. That's nothing. So again, in my personal opinion, perspective matters a lot, all right? That's the mental. In my ultimate squat system, I also have a section on the philosophy where I talk a little bit more about all that stuff. But guys, that's everything I have for you. I know this was a massive video, a very long video. My only hope is that I didn't drag on too much and that you guys actually got value out of this. The last thing I want to do is lead you astray and lead you wrong. I'm very confident in whatever and everything I talked about, but of course, take it all with a grain of salt. Okay, I do believe that a lot of stuff will work for a lot of you. But if you have any questions or concerns, just ask in the comments below. And of course, if you would like to work with me directly, I'd be more than happy to. My one-to-one coaching, of course, is available. So we've got that and the ultimate squat system. If you have any questions, like I said, drop them in the comments below. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. All right, guys, I'll catch you next time. Peace.